Folks, I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing Ted. You've already seen him a couple of times doing presentations. I've known Ted now for a couple of years and just have a huge amount of respect for him and the work he's doing in Hawaii. I've been out numerous times to see him, usually when it's January in Alaska.
Mic is not working.
Hello?
Now it is.
Which one do you have? Is that one?
I don't.
Brown button or?
This one. That was just for practice, Marty. You didn't do it again.
1, 2.
Really?
Okay. So it's my pleasure to introduce who needs no introduction, Ted Ralston. He's going to lead a panel on the first responder training utilizing unmanned aircraft.
Thank you, Marty, and everyone. And if you can bring up our chart, Sean, we might have one person online here calling in from Fairbanks, Greg Foster at the police department. Is there?
No.
He's not there?
No, not yet.
Okay. If you could just pull our charts up. This subject is training for first responders. Kind of an unusual topic for a PPUTRC oriented discussion. But I think it's really important and essential because really it's the end user, the first responders, whether they're in environmental, in healthcare, and public safety or whatever, that we really need to deal with. It isn't all about the UAS or the sensors, it's about information useful to somebody who has to do a mission. So we got excellent mission people up here, and introduce them. We've got, first of all, on the left we got Cato from Alaska Fire Services. We got Eric from, I would say Eric is from the Culinary Arts Institute of America. And we have, that's the CIA, don't know what we're talking about. We have, not Kevin. Derek, right, from the Mississippi, Chief Deputy in Mississippi, Boonville, Mississippi.
County Sheriff Department, Northeast Mississippi.
Okay, and of course you know George Purdy from the island of Lanai, Maui Fire Service. There's a number of other affiliations, drone racing among them. Anyway, we wanted to turn this whole subject upside down and really work it backwards from the end user, from the actual executor of public safety or other kinds of services, rather than start in the conventional way of what is a UAS all about. So that's how I thought we'd approach this. So here's the people. And the discussion is really, should PPUTRC take on the training of this type, or think about the training, manage the training, promote the training, develop the training, in this category of total end user orientation? Should that be something we take on? We talked in an unstructured format the other day about counter drone. This is the same thing, in an unstructured free-form discussion, because we're going to have some strategy discussions tomorrow and on the future, figuring out the future of PPUTRC and the 3 states or 4 states that are part of it. And this is, in my mind, a really important part to talk about. So I know what my answer is, but I wanted our distinguished panel to take us through that. Next chart, if you will, John. Just to let you know, there are a lot of training courses out there. The question is, do they apply to the end user? That's a good question. This one is the one that I actually developed for FEMA a couple of years ago. It's a free course offered one day. Anybody anywhere in the country, this can be provided as long as you get a group of 30 to come together of first responder types. It's a one-day introduction course. It just introduces you to UAS. It doesn't really take you into the incident command system. It doesn't take you into how you're actually going to get going. TEACS, Texas A&M, kind of partners of us within the network of National Disaster Preparedness Training Centers. They have a couple of courses. The first one is you pay to go to, 4 hours, and it's sort of a watered-down version of the NDPTC course. And then Texas A&M also has a service-based program that they'll audit your program, audit your records and your policies and procedures, and vet you to go forward. But these still, they're important, but they don't take us all the way to what the end user really needs. There's a number of courses out there for taking 107s or getting your 333 written. You can get them, they're $150 typically for pretty much anything out there. But that just gets you your 107. And there's a big gigantic deep secret in the 107 somebody can ask me about sometime. But the discussion here is really, should we take on, as PPUTRC, take on that noble goal of thinking about really the guy who counts, or the gal who counts, the end user, and start thinking about developing training, policies and procedures and such. That would then lead backwards into technology development to promote additional functionality. So I really wanted to have our distinguished panel talk about this. I threw up a picture here of incident command structure, which may or may not be the way incident commanders and responders think. But let us start with Cato. We've heard from George a lot, we'll hear from him more. We've heard from Eric a little bit. We haven't heard from Derek yet, but let's start on this end with Cato. And I got a story about Cato's eye patch, I'll tell you privately.
There's a lot of stories about that. I'm gonna have to stand up because I can't not move my feet and talk. So just a quick background. I've been doing fire business and law enforcement and military work for almost 38 years now. And I've been thinking about UAS and information sharing and how to cheat in communications. And I'll say cheat with a light word. How do I get it across without building a giant system? And I've dealt with Ground Zero and the hurricanes, and as far back as the Los Angeles Olympics on this issue, which was a long time ago for some of us. But the big concern we have in it is, I don't want to disparage anybody in here, but this is a great platform for operators and pilots and platforms. My concern for us on our end is actually data management, PII information, and sensors. And how do I get those into our system and people trained in that? Right now, the department has training programs for the smaller versions, which we would like to call squad-based, smaller scale, 10 to 15 minute flight, lightweight. And then we're looking at what we call end-use contracts for the larger scale, long distances. But the PII information and the GIS and sensor packages are huge for us. How do we get our folks into that and get it moving for us? We can hire pilots, we can train pilots. That's a big package for us. It's all about data management, gathering data. How do you manage it, and how do you control the PII?
I came to this panel by making an observation a couple of days ago that the taxpayers have already paid for billions of dollars of software that is useful. And we all laughed at J.C. Coffey's comment this morning that he supported the SEALs. That depended on, guys carrying 7.62 or the things that bark at you. He's supporting both. But the mission is got some common context and useful sockets that are exploitable. And what a shame that the taxpayers have spent billions of dollars doing this for the intelligence community, and that the taxpayers cannot benefit from that same software being used to our benefit here in emergency services. My experience with emergency services started in the 1970s when I was a Civil Air Patrol cadet. And the incident commander would arrive on the scene, and they'd unpack their tent, and then they'd wait for the radio to crack to life, and some cadet would bring them a piece of paper and say, hey, let's go do a mission. Okay, all right. So almost a day after the incident, we would just get our wheels started. And of course, technology has brought us a long way since that time, but it seems that there's a lot more that we could do. And so when I hear JC talk about supporting the SEALs, or Joel Coulter describing how the software is useful and missionized in other areas, I think that we, like, to borrow what he said, there's templates that we should be copying from. We should be plagiarizing this playbook, because there's a lot that we could do to respond better and faster and cheaper and all those good things that we think that we should be doing anyway. So if we can find a way to approach the national community, and I'm saying in particular what they call Title 50, okay? The Department of Defense, under the budget, is funded under Title 10. And so their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance work that's under Title 10, that's got some great software that we could use. There's also some software under Title 50 where you fund the CIA, the National Reconnaissance Office, the National Security Agency, and they too have done templating, pattern recognition, automatic tasking, and activity-based intelligence that's very applicable to emergency services. Well, what a shame that we would not be able to exploit that in a fashion to save lives and to improve our services. So that's how I ended up in this panel.
So we can take what Cato said.
Oh, absolutely.
A couple other guys like Cato.
Right.
Lock up with you for a pizza and some Pepsi for a
Yeah.
couple hours.
I don't know if Cato would want to be locked up with me. He'd run and run.
Not that cheap.
So we can actually then have a test case here, right here in Alaska, of your service needs and your ability to see where those opportunities might exist, and see if we
Yes.
can push that forward.
Yes.
Derek, down south.
How I ended up on this panel was Ted asked me to share my thoughts with y'all how unmanned aircraft systems are going to affect law enforcement. We know that this is a thing that's going to be of the future. What we don't know is how are we going to implement them into our departments? And we're relying on people like y'all in this room to provide training to us, show us how we can use these systems to help our people fight crime. Not only that, we need training on what platform will work best in our cities, counties, and states. It's a big unknown to us. It scares us because law enforcement doesn't like to admit, we don't have all the answers, but I'll be the first to tell you we don't. It scares us. So we're reaching out to y'all, the universities, the people that work with these on a day-to-day basis, and give us the training that we need to use these systems. And Ted and I talked about something else. When the FAA brings down the regulations, who's going to enforce these? We don't know. We need training like that. So I guess the thing that I would stress to y'all today from the law enforcement's view is we need educated on these, and we're relying on y'all to do it. Thank y'all.
Derek, that was great. So I think we need to lock you up with these two guys also as part of that committee that's going to come forward. Well, there might be somebody from law enforcement here has a jail he can go to. George.
Hello, everybody. Okay, my journey into the UAS, mine came from a real scenario, real plane crash. I actually had a drone in my truck, but I knew the rules because I work in an airport, I understand FAA rules, and I made a decision not to use it. I stuck to my original training, what we're trained to do in today's current rescue procedures. Adding a drone to that would just enhance it. So from that day forward, I made a promise to myself that I'll do whatever it takes to actually fly a drone legally at an airport for an emergency based upon this plane crash that happened on 19 2 years ago. So building the whole process of the 333 and using my background from the end user, so I took the big picture where I wanted it to be, and then I reverse engineered it where I needed to start. Is how I accomplished what I did on September 16th of this year. So the platform, right across the board, we all have a common foundation. And what I was able to do is use the incident command system. Since 9/11, that was our bridge or our playbook for multi-jurisdictional connection across the line. Using the NIMS, the ICS is where UAS makes sense. It's getting the incident commander that information needed. UAS intelligence is your frontline information to actually make choices before you send folks out into the field. In the past, we were just given a location and we actually had to do a ground search on foot, walking through the bushes, hand in hand, going across. In this scenario, we actually flew the truck actually got stuck at a gate. He couldn't open the lock. So the drone was able to make it to the scene faster than the truck. The incident commander had it on his phone, well actually the ops chief, had it on his phone. He actually saw what happened. He already knew where to assign his truck. It happened much more quickly than we ever thought. I just knew in my head it would work, but the person who was leading the charge, this was his first time ever. He hasn't been around a drone. He didn't even know what it was. He just knew he got information on a tablet, which at that point I wanted to prove. To take this picture out of what today's public understands, these propellers and this whole thing, and it's data. It's an SD card. And now in the state of Hawaii, with my group, they're changing. Last 7 months has been amazing. That they don't even call it a drone. Everybody's calling it a tool. So there is movement that's happening. But I built a step-by-step how to use it. One of the questions was, what decisions do you have to make to actually deploy a drone? So that's where the 4 Ds came into play. Dangerous, dirty, dull, denied. Once I explained that to the captains and some of the chiefs, the light bulb went off. And the fifth one to that was no infrastructure. I said that should be common sense. You can't get there. At least get some eyeballs out there. Don't send us first responders out there to get hurt. At the end of the day, we flew a safe operation at an airport. I was so happy. But we did a good job that nobody publicized it. I'm like, why? And we proved the point, we followed the procedures, and it was very simple. And I designed it in a sense where us as firemen, we could process an 800-page document in 5 steps. But we trained for a year to actually break it down, understand the whole book, but took 5 actions that represented 800 pages of work. The other part to that is my wife has a lawyer on speed dial. Because that we did this accident or this demonstration as an operation safely using a drone, if I ever get called to a mission and I go out and I get hurt, my wife knows that because we did this operation and our state did not adopt it, I said, sue the hell out of the state of Hawaii. And that's how state of Hawaii works. State of Hawaii is a sue-happy state. So I'm just playing their game. But we proved that we could do it right. Why do we always have to screw up or somebody gonna die before we actually make a choice? That's what I want to change today and what we're doing and doing here across the state. We all speak in the same language, we just need a little guidance. But for the university side, industry side, come to us end users and ask us what we need. In the initial attack of something just happening right now, I don't need autonomy. I would rather have a person behind that has the experience of what I'm looking for. They should have manual control, flying around, gathering that information. Autonomy comes in when it's the dull, the D with the dull, long duration. That's where I want to save manpower, put them to rest, execute, give them a task down the road. But on the, say for example, a SWAT team, we need a UAV operator in a department, right next to the incident commander, whoever's in charge, flying that drone, moving it where he or she seems fit, because it's dynamic, it's changing. So that's where I got very interested in drone racing, because you need those skills to maneuver in the dark at night, whatever it takes, in trees, through the buildings, these things can do it. So that's where that part comes into play, and that's speed, and that's what we need. I just want to cut time. So that plane crash on the line, we found them in 12 minutes. From patient contact to Honolulu on another island, 55 minutes. With that drone in that car, I would have cut that down to 6 minutes. That bothered me for 2 years. But the day I did fly that drone at the airport, that's when my soul was healed, because I know I did it. So that's where I'm coming from the end user's point, and how to do it right. And I just want to take it, share it, and pay it forward. Any questions? That's my point.
I think we have pretty much unanimous agreement here at the table that end users need to be respected, understood, and information from them and their desires or needs harvested. And I think the PPUTRC would be well placed to go take that on as a task. We have just a short time. We're running into our time limit. Anybody out here with a comment?
We can take another 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mike.
I have a comment. The University of Alaska Fairbanks has a HSCM degree. Everybody hear me? They've got a hazards emergency management degree up there that is now not only a bachelor's degree, but they've got a master's degree up there as well. And the director, that's a friend of mine, Cam Carlson, and I know that Cam is looking for ways to inject UAS into his courses, and he and I are going to be, working on how to make that happen. But I would love to have you guys' experience and, expertise and everything in putting something like that together, because he's got about 50 people a year that, can come through that program and everything. And everybody wants to know something about how these things may affect their operations and how to employ them and what to do. So, thanks.
So Mike, what you're talking about is some process here by which we can, again, connect with our panel here and others that they know of across the 4 states and the in the network and pull that up and make it a continuous feed into you based on questions that your class is generating such.
So let me just interject here, and Mike and I have talked about this before. At the university side, the large group that's here, there's another aspect of the university up there, and it's the fire sciences program. In the fire sciences program, we've been able to link the federal government and its firefighters, structure and wildland into a program. And the basis for that program is to get them education, because I don't need dumb firefighters. I honestly don't. I can get all the workers, strong backs and weak minds I need. I need ones that can think, and they'll grow with evolution. So part of that natural evolution is looking at this and interjecting and talking to Mike and some other people and interjecting GIS, data management, UAV, and just a little technical stuff with sensors and stuff like that into the program. So it's another hook to pull students in from a totally different aspect from being a firefighter, but that's some of the skills we need as firefighters to go forward in our jobs. We can always get firefighters. I hate to say it that way because I've been one for so long. We can always get first-year firefighters. I can't get the middle management and upper firefighters to get those skills to move on, and I want them to move on. I don't want to see firefighters stuck in the middle getting injured all the time because they're getting older. I want them to move up and be able to use their brains. So this is where we're trying to head with this, at least at the University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Question?
I just thought I'd share, we have a similar experience. We flew a large wildfire last year. We spent about a week at Teepee Springs. What we found was that the guys on the ground, they live off of paper maps and push-to-talk radios, AA batteries, and that was the life that they had, that was their culture. We showed up with all this high-tech stuff that we brought from the military side, remote video terminals and giant screens and computers, and they're like, does it work on AA batteries? And kind of printed on a map. What we found was that largely what we had to do is provide that end-to-end solution where we did all the GIS stuff, we did all the analytics, and recreated the fire maps that they had from their other systems, but if we could do it faster in terms of turnaround time than they could with other systems, that was a value to them. But they really weren't in a position to be prepared to accept the new technology. We had to make that technology fit into the culture that they had, and that was a challenge. So education, like you said, is a big part of that. But I think across the board, as we push into first responders, these other things, people have a way they've always done things. How do we take this high-tech stuff that young people can understand coming out of school and incorporate that into the culture of people who've been doing the same thing for 30 or 40 years. And these firefighters, they choose to live in the woods in tents for 6 months out of the year with no cell service. And that's a culture. I don't know how you get over that. I just want to make that comment.
Thank you. The other thing that I observed personally is that firefighters are basically incredible problem solvers. So even if they're out 6 months in the woods, they'll find some way to make that in connection. I'll just tell you my own personal connection here. My son, same name as, was the administrative head of those 19 Prescott, Arizona wildland hotshots who perished 2 or 3 years ago. He came down off the mountain the night before to take care of administrative duties, and then the boys went down the next day. But what we were talking about this afterwards, and he of course is emotionally unable to continue in that business, so he's actually changed his life direction because of that, as George has to a certain extent. But anyway, he said, Dad, if you could just take that drone you got and put a bright probe on it, or a strobe, and if we could have flown it at 500 feet over those guys, just over their GPS location, the water bomber that had water could have hit the drone. He said the rules of engagement for their water bomber was circling DC-10, and plenty of water, but he couldn't see the ground condition because the wind had changed. It was a thunderstorm had gone through, the wind had shifted 180, and what was a backfire became a front fire and covered these guys with smoke. So in that short time, they have about a 15-minute interval, they're gone. He said if you could just have that drone flying at 500 feet, the water bomber could have hit the drone with a bright enough strobe, and that would have satisfied the rules and would have changed the outcome. So anyway, we all have these experiences and stories and such, but there's no end of potential uses. And I appreciate you guys. Derek, you didn't talk much about the incident command system in your neck of the woods. You want to say a few words about that? No pressure, Derek.
I really don't know what you want me to talk about here, but
In terms of it being the connecting tissue, the thing that we can focus on, as George has indicated, as a way to go
So
forward.
the plane crash that you had to deal with, go through how you dealt with that plane crash and trying to find things.
We had a plane crash that happened in our county, and we live in a very rural county. And this plane went down in a large, non-residential area, and the only way we had to find this plane was to search it with a line of people and a foot search. It took us about 2 days to find let me back up. We found the plane the first day, and had we had an unmanned aircraft, we could have found this plane in probably 15 minutes. But the bad thing about it, we had a young lady that when we went back, she was sucked out of the plane when the wings come off, and it took us 2 days to find this lady. We had a good incident command center, but with the tools that we had at the time of the crash, it took us 2 days. And had we had the tools that y'all are talking about today, we could have done this in about 15 minutes. That's the kind of things that law enforcement needs unmanned aircraft systems to save time, and time in our line of work save lives.
Okay, oh, we have two in the audience here. Peter. You got the mic? Who's got the mic controls?
Okay, can you hear me okay? I'll try not to stay on my soapbox too long, but this is where I live. It's where the data is, and being able to share the data. And like you all, I'm a taxpayer too. It really bothers me when we develop a system over here and it can't talk to a system over here. And it happens all the time. So a couple of points. Thank you, fire service guys. Y'all are amazing. So I also work on the NFPA, and we're writing a data interoperability annex. All of those EXL standards are a part of that annex, so it's going to be there. So hold on. And they're also a part of the FEMA strategy. To your point on the Intel side, y'all heard about me talking about the Common Learning Protocol, how great for that is. Well, the Intel community got that, so that's pretty good. Well, that sounds like a suspicious activity report. Well, that's a SAR. You can't see that in public safety. You guys can't see that SAR. So we're not going to allow you to see that. And we're going to call it a SAR, although it could be a CAP, it could be interoperable, but all these other systems are being built around the world, but no, it's a SAR. They're the fusion centers. And you can't see that data in Mississippi. You need to know that when there's a suspicious activity going around your energy plant. When there's a fence break, that's a SAR. That's one of the things Honeycomb Networks does. She's not in here right now, but she's got the high-level clearances that are necessary to do that sanitizing of a SAR, make it a CAP so the rest of the world can see it. Same thing with the new NIBRS. What's a NIBRS report? It's an incident command report that you can't see, Jim. You know, the rest of us can't see because it's behind the wall. We need to sanitize that data and get it out there in a standard way. So those are things that we've got to be able to do. We've got to be able to bridge those gaps.
Not only do we have to be able to do it, but let me give you, going back to your point, at the end of the Desert Storm 1 war, there was a big allegation that the intelligence community had kept information, and they affectionately referred to it as the green door. And basically General Horner, the 4-star general in charge of the air war, accused Title 50 of saying, my pilots died because you had information behind the green door that you kept secret. And that's unacceptable. Now, it later turned out that an investigation revealed that that wasn't so much the case, but they created a thing called TENCAP, Tactical Exploitation of National Capabilities, which entirely addresses that issue of how is it that we sanitize the original source information. I don't care where the information came from. If you got it from Madame Gazelle and her team leads, fine, okay? I'm agnostic. Just give me the picture, okay? Give me the intelligence report. Give me the substantive, actionable information, and I could really care less where you got it, okay? Sanitize it, but give it to me. Don't let anybody die because I had a secret that I needed to keep behind the green door. On my way up here, I sat next to a gentleman who lost a bush pilot last week. And apparently because of weather, this guy was crashed at 9,500 feet, and they had to wait 4 days to go start a search and rescue. And that, you know, I had to ask the question, how many bush pilots, or for that matter, any kind of pilot, have died, not because they were killed on impact, but because the elements killed them? And here we have a UAS capability, which could drop blankets, medicine, communications, or anything else to keep those people alive for that 4-day weather period where I could get up to 9,500 feet to save their lives. And lead, and like you said, the young lady that may have perished, I don't know, but time is everything, right? I mean, time kills and delay kills. And shame on us if we can't take something that we already have an indigenous capability to use and not use it to save lives. So you're exactly right. Well, pardon me for banging my head when you said you can't see it. I have a lot of forehead bangs that way.
You knew that. So thank you for hearing me out. I think these are important things that we've got to find out as a community to address.
Oh, we have probably time for more here.
Yeah, I guess there's two strings. My area is that I've actually taught the FEMA courses on volcano crisis awareness. So I know, similar to Ted, how they're taught. And I think there's two sort of streams to this. One is there's the training, and you can train people on how to use these. But if there's no official policy or documentation that says you can use this, it's observable data, just like a helicopter, just like a fixed wing. So if there's a problem or there's a situation and somebody comes back and says, you made this decision with this data, unless it's written down to say you're legally able to use that and it's defensible, then you're not going to take it out of the vehicle because you're potentially going to think, oh, we have a problem, just like George didn't do it. So unless it's added to that list and says you've got fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters, UASs, then you can take it out and you'll use the data because you know that it's defensible when you take it back and say, yes, this observation helped me. Then, if you've got it in a policy, they'll say, okay, where's the training? Then you can do the training because then, as soon as the person walks out the door with a certificate, the next day, they can legally use the aircraft through training and through the policy through whoever's department it is, sheriffs or fire or police. So it's getting the larger authority to approve it as a listed asset, and then at the same time, being able to then take out of your back pocket the training money. You've got to work in parallel.
Thank you. Mike again.
Yeah, I got another one. Looking at the structure up here is very nice and it's informative and everything. I know that concerned citizens sometimes happen on events and they would like to be a part of that. And there's a group of people that have drones, but you can't sometimes because the incident commander has to maintain control over the area. And to help out with those situations, you need a certain level of training to respond to that. If you wouldn't mind talking about that, Eric, about that particular situation, and in this case, how a UAV might be able to be integrated into the chain here, I appreciate that.
So you're talking about the bush pilot situation?
No, I'm talking about 9/11.
Oh, you mean when, I'm sorry. So frame it in the context of anticipatory.
What you were doing at the time and when you got turned away from the event because of the...
Okay, well, to make a long story short, to save some time, if you want to hear the rest of the story, there's kind of a funny version of this story, but I was at the Pentagon when 9/11 occurred, and I was with a bunch of fighter pilots. Well, the last thing an incident commander needs is a bunch of angry fighter pilots who've decided they're going to be heroes and run into the Pentagon to pull bodies from a burning building. And but we're fighter pilots, so we're going to go do it. And there was one fire chief, and there was about 6 of us fighter pilots. Well, guess who was going to win that fight? And it wasn't until the general showed up and called us off that basically stopped us from going inside of a burning building that more than likely we would have perished in, because there were people inside there. There was an emergency. People needed to be saved. We weren't witting of what we could contribute. We just simply needed to save lives, and we absolutely would have run in that building. So that kind of insensitivity or lack of training, we were on the spot. We were available, right? Heck, we're heroes. Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to run into a burning building. And we would have been lost. But I think for lack of training, for lack of ability and understanding, had they had the ability to show up to one site and had George along, they wouldn't necessarily have to have 6 fighter pilots staggering in the dark. They could have a UAS go find out where those people who were needed help and go get them immediately. So you're right.
Yeah, sorry, I guess my point is more to the fact of there's a certain level of incident training that you can take for FEMA and everything so that you're allowed to interject into, incidents like this
upon approval of the incident commander, correct?
we have a ton of unified command stuff, everything from insurance companies participating with us, and it depends on the incident. And I'll say the incident management teams I belong to as an operations section chief, it depends on the incident, because you can go to anything at any time. You know, I've gone from being in the back of a C-130 with a chainsaw cutting open 55-gallon drums of Dawn to disperse oil, to guarding on the Olympics, to 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina. So that's the question. It's not an easy answer, but it's incident dependent and size dependent, because on any given incident, I can go from managing 20, 30 people in a 24-hour period to 6,000 to 7,000 people in a 24-hour period. Now, tracking those people and giving them the correct information is what I'm concerned about. My goal is to shut everything down if it doesn't feel right to me. And if I don't have that information, guess what happens? I shut it down. And that's why, you know, when we see these drones, and I really got to quit calling them drones, we see these unmanned aerial vehicles flying through our incidences, we have to shut them down. We shut everything down. And it's not just public safety we're worried about firefighter safety.
Right.
So it is huge, but you can participate.
But if you had a list of people that have been vetted and gone through your training for certain level situations, then perhaps those folks might be valuable assets that could help you out with particular situations.
Oh, no, certainly we have tons of contractors that do that for us right now. It's just going through the steps and getting on the list to do it. We have tons of contractors in all locations to do it. Pretty much our basic firefighter stuff and our basic incident management stuff is built on our permanent militia. And the rest of that stuff, probably 80% of that stuff, is outside help. You know, every bit of it is contract work. And that's what we're trying to look at. Now, there's two aspects here. One is, like I said, the small squad-based stuff that we can perform that we don't need large support for, and larger stuff that we can support, you know. And I'll say this in the likelihood that there's multiple things here we're talking about, not just training in this, but training in communications and tracking people, training in search and rescue, training in flight following, which is hugely important in Alaska. You know, every one of our aircraft has a process and a problem to track. And so it's a long-term program, and it goes all the way from our dispatchers who don't get out in the field to our managers who have to make those decisions back to tell the firefighters where to go. So there's a link to all of it in there. It's just figuring out that link and getting them all to think the same path.
I have an experience with that. We had in the past just community members just running out to an emergency, you know, didn't know anything. It took us 4 years to organize our item. That's how long it took. We had to take, I broke down our system where it was just the airport staff, a mutual aid responder staff, your private community, or private owner, and in the community. 5 different groups that I had to go and educate over time. But you have to feed them information slowly. Became CERT, which is the Citizens Emergency Response Team Trainer. Also Red Cross and all those organizations. Through those organizations after 9/11, when these organizations started speaking the same language, which is the incident command, that what we did is we used our airport disaster aircraft drill every 3 years to test the system. So through that vetting process, we got the community to understand, don't come running in. Right. So we are, in any incident command system, your staging location or your staging officer, that is your godsend. He stops that chaotic crowd from going anywhere, but you're giving the community a place to go. They're just so happy to sit in staging waiting to do something. And like Cato said, if anything is out of the ordinary, you stop the incidents. And that's it. I would have people who would come in and try to run the show. I'd kick him out. And he was a chief and I was only a firefighter. He can wear all these white shirts, bugles. He did not accept transfer of command. Get out of here. I got reprimanded for that, but he got okay after. But that's where I make my statement. He didn't want to take over, he wanted to backseat and tell me what to do. I said, hell, I did the training, I know the community, and that's where it comes down to. It's your local community. All emergency responders start what's local. That's where you're gonna get your support. As resources come in, my goal now is to set up an incident command system where another person who speaks the same language plugs in. They see how deep your incident command system is, they know how big the incident is. That's what I started learning, and that's what we started teaching, especially with our mutual aid responders, having that conversation. Once you see where you are on the tree, you know how bad the incident is. And that's what we learned. On the airport fireman side, our disasters start at the highest chaotic point possible. Your county fireman side starts at the beginning, where if it gets to the chaotic point, you let it get out of control. We take craziness and bring it back to calmness. So that's the type of training and how I think. So I'm always get thrown the bomb. And I gotta figure out how to disassemble it, in my sense. But it starts with the community and it takes time. So even with this UAS that's flying around our neighborhoods, and I know the operators, so I'm encouraging them to come. So in the point of a hurricane in Hawaii, that I'm educating them now, so when it does happen, I know I got cameramans in the sky. I just give them an email, send me what I need, and then I'll send it to civil defense. So that's how I solve that problem within my community. And that's how I'm using it. And once you give them a task, they're more receptive. So it's community-based, one at a time. That's the key. Government will follow because the community will vote the right people in, and that's the way I tell them. So once you threaten their seat, then you start to move. So, thank you.
Once you get too close to their house, they start to.
They move faster.
They're faster.
Okay, we've run ourselves to well beyond our limit. Marty gave us some time, the hall monitor back there. And at this point, I think we'll thank our panel very much. I do believe we have an implied order mandate now to organize this in a way that PPUTRC can take it on organically. But thank you very much.
Water.
We can have our next panel come up, please.
Can I? Well, the panel's coming up. Can you show that video I sent you?
Yeah,
I got we're talking so much about education, so much about connecting with kids. I got this 30-second thing from the Philippines, and I just wanted to share it because we talk so much about what's happening here. Where are we? In the Arctic Circle or something. The same kind of energy and interest takes place in both souths.
Sorry, that was my fault. Does this have audio?
Yeah, it does. It does. Audio. Watch that little girl. Oh no, on the video. Anyway, that's just an example, and it was really cool. The 6-year-old got really excited. The 9-year-old, who should be getting all the attention, shows up. She's not getting the attention. She leaves the scene. That was kind of funny. But all those kids are probably going to think about that forever. What the situation was, their school had been half demolished. What we were doing is flying fixed wing and rotorcraft to observe what's left of the school so they can re-meet there. And where's the rubble pile, where's the roof at risk, and where's the access. But anyway, but the kids got involved, the principals got involved, the teachers got involved, everybody got involved. It was just awesome. So I thank you for that 30-second moment there.
Thank you, Ted. I appreciate it.
And can I just turn this off so it's not shining in all of your faces?
Yeah, we don't.
Sounds good.
So Ted, thank you very much. That was a really great discussion and a panel. I learned a few things about George Purdy I didn't know. I'll have to keep in mind for the future. So our next panel is on education and training of UAS operators in Alaska. So we're bringing it home. We have Dr. Mike Hatfield from University of Alaska Fairbanks, Ryan Marlowe from Alaska Aerial, Zach Fields from Alaska Department of Labor. Andrew with us is going to talk about it. And what we're going to do is really talk, we're going to start with Ryan. And Ryan's been involved in the STEM aspects and sort of really going to graduate it from the beginnings of the education process, where it's at with from an unmanned aircraft, on unmanned aircraft, and then go from where Andrew's at with the technical training, being an operator, being a pilot, being a maintainer, being a logistician, all the things that are associated with what we do when we go and operate. Then take it up to Dr. Hatfield to talk about it from an engineering and aerospace perspective, and then we'll have Zach close it out from the Department of Labor perspective, and I'll throw some anecdotes in along the way. So, Ryan, thank you.
Perfect. My name is, of course, Ryan. What I'm talking about here today is the integration of UAS program, STEM pathways, career pathways into K through 12 education. Right now, we have a program at South Anchorage High School that we've been working on for 2 years now. It started as an after-school program, and basically we had the entire after-school program filled up instantly, which we had 20 students out there. And we started with basically just the interest was 107. This was pre-107. All these students were interested in getting their remote pilot's license. And that's kind of when we saw that there was a need for curriculum to push these students, not only getting them their 107 certification, but pushing them into the field that they wanted to go. So we split that program into survey ag, maintenance and repair, and motion picture, which South, of course, adopted with their AV Arts program, the motion picture pathway. So fast forward to this year, there is a UAS program there currently where the students are they're just finishing their federal regulations, and they will all be ready to take their Part 107. So we will have 25 high school students with their remote pilot license when they leave high school, as well as the motion picture accreditation. So once they're done, we've finished all the pre-work. Now we can get into the career pathway, where we're opening up these students to on-set views, taking them out with us on jobs, and actually showing them what it's like to deal with international film crews. You know, getting directors from LA that are loud and obnoxious. So it's like actually exposing them to what they can't teach you in books. So getting hands-on with them, and yeah. So basically, that's what's happening right now at South. That same curriculum we've used for different organizations. It was originally designed with NOAA. We trained National Marine Fisheries Services up here for beluga whale response. And that's kind of when we first built that program for training, and we've adapted it for the older generation and the younger generation. And it's definitely amazing to see the difference of students and the older generation, of how fast they adapt to the programming and the hands-on and all of that. So yeah, so now we've taken the curriculum, we've gone through all the steps, and we're pushing it nationwide, building those career pathways back to Alaska. So partnering with safety organizations, associations here in Alaska, industry, education, and ultimately building these pathways so that students can come most from Alaska as well as the rest of the lower 48 to feed our growing UAS need for Arctic environments. We have so much land, mapping services, and basically filling all of these groups that will be using UAS systems here in the next 5 years, building that local workforce, and go from there. So.
Great, thank you. So, so thank you very much. Last week I was in Edmonton, Alberta at the Canadian Large Unmanned Aircraft event that's held there, sort of like the AUVSI event that is in the U.S. And the primary, the camera work, the majority of the camera work on the most recent Avengers film was actually done by a drone. And the company that did that work was there. They did a presentation, and it was an hour-long presentation, and you wanted more when it was over with. It was mind-blowing. But what they talked about was the need for people with this skill and expertise, and we're talking about high levels. We're not we are talking ultra high levels of skill that's required to actually do the kind of work that's needed for these kinds of movies. But also, you mentioned what the industry, a little bit about what the industry is like, and that the director at one point made a comment, and quite a few people overheard it, that he could do almost everything he needed to do with a couple of good drones. And what happened is there's some immediate alienation from the drone crew from almost everybody else because it's highly unionized and highly organized. And so there's some interesting stuff happening from the insertion of this technology into the movie industry. But it's going in that way, and there's definitely going to be requirements for high quality professional operators, period. Andrew, from your perspective on the technical side, please.
Okay, well, as I understand, LAS was trying to develop unmanned aviator curriculum. Well, surprisingly enough, my graduate thesis was a comparative analysis of all the UAV aviator curriculum that's going on in the lower 48. So if you're going to create something, it pays to know what's already out there. So I found 18 schools offering UAV aviator curriculum, 8 associate degree plans and 10 grad or bachelor degree plans. It's important distinction that these weren't schools using UAS for engineering, inculcating engineering aviation concepts. So as best as I understand the regulations right now, those would be model aircraft because they're educational, not UAS. But these schools are actually, what is the next generation of unmanned aviator going to look like? How do we train them to meet the needs of the workforce? And it all started with a nagging suspicion that maybe we're doing it wrong. But after the research, I ended up realized that was a mistaken question rather than one with an unpleasant answer. The results were troubling. In short, there was a vast amount of diversity or lack of standardization between the topics that were taught from one school to the next. And not surprisingly enough, this diversity was primarily in the unmanned aviation end of the curriculum. So either it was hands-on training or academic classroom research, great deal of variation. Earlier this week, counting mammals in the Arctic, they used a coefficient of variation to indicate how repeatable the event was. And I found coefficient of variations on hands-on material approaching 1.0, meaning that the standard deviation was almost as much as the mean. So that shows us that things are all over the place. So it's a big sandbox to play in. Just a matter of which corner of it are you going to decide to occupy. Now, mitigating factor with that is a lot of these schools aren't trying to meet a national need with their curriculum. It's a local influence. And each region is going to have its own unique needs for the aviation, unmanned aviator workforce. With all that said, they used a large variety of platforms too. So some of the platforms were fixed wing, some multi-rotor. Very few of the schools used helicopters. And the diversity means that some of these students aren't going to know the same topics as the next students, and even if they all know the same topics, they're going to have a different depth of knowledge in each of these individual topics. But the different UAS used, I couldn't find any correlation between that and the curriculum distribution between training and academic education. Nor did I find very little data about what payloads the students were being trained on. Are they fixed camera for geospatial or mapping, or many of the ecological conservation projects we heard about earlier, or are they full motion video for, say, a first responder? Very little data in that department. So, at the end, what do we need to do going forward? And what I found was peculiar. A lot of these schools require private pilot, instrument, commercial, even multi-engine ratings. So you'd have a student graduating the unmanned aviator degree plan with hundreds of manned hours. They'd have one class where they flew a multi-rotor DJI for all of 6 hours. So I found it peculiar. You've got a degree plan called a UAS degree plan. The student graduate has 5 hours on a UAS and 50 hours on a manned aircraft. So Are we labeling these degree plans properly? Or do we need to reestablish or rearrange our priorities crafting the curriculum? So when you do research, what I found is a lot of rabbit holes. I saw other things like, oh, look at that. Trying to prevent scope creep. So, for instance, a lot of the schools, or some of the schools, used simulators. Well, how do unmanned simulators compare to the real thing in training transfer, fidelity, relevancy, and cost? Well, it's something that I didn't look at and didn't have the time for. But for follow-on research efforts, when someone is saying, what should I do my graduate thesis in my UAS degree plan for? These are wonderful leads for the student. Another potential improvement would be to, instead of looking at the curriculum at the resolution that I looked at, go at the course catalog level, go to the syllabus level for each individual class. So what does week 1 of this class entail, and week 2, and so on and so forth? Finer resolution data, better analysis of the distribution of the curriculum. But going back to the initial problem or the concern, the nagging suspicion I had that maybe we were doing it wrong, I realized we don't know what right looks like. So going forward, a sequential research where we look at these graduates of these programs and see how they have met the needs of their employers, whether they needed any additional training or education after their completion. And then we can look at this data and say, well, students in this program did better than students in that program. So then we'll be able to say, not that this is wrong or that's right, but this is more right or less wrong. Coming up with curriculum for the populace or the natives is important to support the industry, but it can't just throw paint on a wall and hope it sticks. You have to have a strategy, figure out how you're going to meet it, and a lot of these schools that were in the lower 48 aren't just a unmanned aviator curriculum locally, but they're seeking to draw the gains from their neighboring states. 2 states side by side, one's going to receive $10 million in economic benefit, the other one's going to receive 5, or maybe we can get 12 and steal from my neighbor. That's what a lot of these programs are doing. It's not just about how well we can do with our benefits, but if they're not paying attention, how many of their poker chips can we slide across the table when they're not paying attention?
Thank you very much. Robert?
Can I comment before we continue?
Absolutely. Would you
I
like a
think
mic?
Mike may say the same thing. So, Andrew, I want to attack your comment about the fact there was manned aircraft training in unmanned aircraft programs. Let's remember what the FAA rules were.
It's not a matter of that there was, is that it vastly outweighed the unmanned training in the program.
I understand, but I'll use Hines Community College in Mississippi as an example. I'm an employer. Our 2 of their, they had to have unmanned to meet FAA criteria. I think Mike and others would tell you, and that was the reason I hope FAA finally let up on that requirement. They don't need it. It's much different flying a UAS than it is a manned aircraft. You're in a completely different control situation. So you almost made an implicit, an indictment of programs, and understand there's also board level approval, college boards that have to approve curriculums. So getting that in, the first thing is, well, this is what FAA requires them to have to learn. It's often not an academic exercise of, well, I'm the professor and this is what I think. It's what does the customer want or what is the legislation. I think you'll find Hines, for example, has changed that. Auburn, others, and I'm sure UAF.
Sure. So I want to add a nuance to this a little bit. As Robert has been and is in the position of being a hiring authority and employer for UAS operators and pilots, I have been for UAF, And the other sort of piece of this, going above and beyond what's offered academically and technically, and what the FAA says this is your minimum requirements, is actually market demand. So, and as the market becomes more complex, as we're eventually attaining true, beyond visual line of sight, when you approach or are approached by a potential client and they have already a well-established aviation program, and you've got to actually sit down with that aviation program, whoever runs it for that company, and satisfy them that you're a safe operator, it is in your best interest to put your best foot forward. And so from the UAF side, we have, we've changed up our hiring practices considerably over the past couple of years. And others are doing it, but it's because they're actually trying to meet market requirements from a, in other words, we have pilots that are commercial pilots who are flying unmanned aircraft for us. And the reason they're hired and brought on board is to meet the requirements of our clients. In one case, we have one client that we're supporting, and this is a aircraft with a 42-meter wingspan. This is not a little aircraft, and it is a complex aircraft. It's got a lot to it. And so to meet the requirements of winning that contract, winning that work, and supporting that client, we go far above and beyond what a lot of our peers do in other universities to be able to win those contracts. So we're just meeting market demand in some cases. That's my 2 cents. So, Mike.
Thanks, Marty. Yeah, so a lot of you guys get to see the presentation that I did yesterday talking about education, from the university perspective and an ecosystem, Here in the state of Alaska, what a healthy aerospace ecosystem looks like, because I need that, as a consumer at the education level. Our currency is students, and eventually, if we don't have enough students, our business model doesn't look so good, okay? Especially with the oil prices and everything that's going on right now. I'm super excited about the stuff that Brian and folks are doing at the K through 12 programs, and the fact that not only now are students actually, building in drones and everything, but they've actually got structured courses where they're learning to fly and they're getting, the 107 training and everything, because that's going to create a large market of students, or a large influx of students looking for the next day, and I want to be right there at the university level to be able to help them out. I'm super excited about what we're doing, what Andrew is doing with the CTC and everything, because a lot of these students we're going to get, non-traditional students, or students that come into a particular area. Maybe folks are coming into aviation management and everything, and maybe some of those have a technical background. Maybe some of them will kind of spill our way, and we'll see a little bit more of that in the engineering education. And likewise, I want to have opportunities, up in engineering and everything to harvest those courses and everything, so that students that are coming in that are more operationally minded, they're going like, look, this is a neat opportunity. I can go out and I can get some aviation courses and everything. We had a chance to take a great tour. Shar took us on a great tour last night and everything. We saw, simulators over there, and I'm from an engineering perspective now. I'm working more closely with UAA. I've got a course that I'm, my boss on the engineering side, Doug Gehring down there, is working with the dean up here, and the Board of Regents have, edicted that we will work more closely together. They're forming a joint board to oversee curriculum. They want to make sure that we are, this coming year, they're going to be looking at our curriculum and everything, and going for common course, titles, and course numbering and everything is the first step of a multi-year process where they're starting to align the curriculum a little bit more. And because of some of the numbers that we see in electrical engineering, computer engineering, where I'm up at UAF and everything, it is a small program. But this semester I was able to teach a course because I had 6 students down here in Anchorage that take the course by teleconference with me. And it's wonderful. It's a much more wonderful process than I ever thought it would be in my wildest dreams. It works really well. And now I'm super excited about doing more of that in the future. Now, the engineering deans have a goal where they're going to share like 10 courses a semester. And I'm hoping to be a part of that, because I know I've got students down here that they don't have an aerospace engineering minor. We do. We got students in some of the courses that we're offering up there and everything. And of course, they're going to have classes down here that we want to take too. And as some of those students become more and more interested in the operational flavor, well, then there's opportunities with the CTC and aviation, management programs in the future. and there should be a good cross-pollination of programs and everything, you know, from all those entities. So super. A couple of Ryan, great successes that George Purdy's had out of Hawaii and everything, and you know, if you know that were to get started up there, I don't want to that. I've got parents to get